You're listening to Top Line Winnipeg with Nik Lynham and Brady Ricketts.
Welcome back to the Top Line Winnipeg Jets weekly podcast. And before we turn it over to talk some Winnipeg Jets, I'm going to throw it over to Mikey to address something in the sports media scene this week, and then we'll dive into our regularly recorded programming here. Mikey, take it away.
Yeah, so we just wanted to extend our condolences from Top Line Media as well to the family and friends of Ted Wyman, the longtime Winnipeg sports columnist. He was a big part of the Winnipeg scene when it comes to the Bombers, when it comes to the Wheat Kings, when it came to curling as well. Ted was he was a pretty great guy. He was a fantastic storyteller, was one of the big things that you always noticed in his writing. I was lucky enough to meet him a couple times, sit next to him up in the press box at Investors Group Field, or Princess Auto Stadium now. So yeah, we just wanted to extend our condolences out to his family and his friends. He'll definitely be missed. That's a big voice and a big space in the Winnipeg sports community. So just wanted to do that.
Yes, definitely some unfortunate news, and our thoughts and prayers are with the Wyman family and friends. Brady Ricketts is back with us to talk about the Winnipeg Jets, and we enter this week 15 games in now.
Yep.
An NHL record 14 1-0.
Your President's Cup.
Your potential President's Cup winning Winnipeg Jets at this point. I pissed some people off making a comparison to that or the Grey Cup this week, eh? Tough.
Yeah, the Bomber fans did not like hearing you say a President's Trophy would be bigger than any of their Grey Cup wins.
Hey.
Wow, you are really Nik.
It's an opinion.
This guy Nik loves it to just. There's three things in life. There's you got to pay your taxes. At one point, you are going to be buried in the ground, and Nik Lynham loves to start a little bit of a Twitter drama, whether it be with Montreal Canadiens fans or now in his own demographic, but on the football side.
Yeah, you got to poke the bear a little bit. I don't know. I thought it was an interesting debate. But for 14 1-0 for the Winnipeg Jets, and
14 Leafs in 0 actually.
Hey, I gotta say, I gotta defend the boys here. They gotta defend the Winnipeg market.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta say the roles have kind of reversed here on social media. The
Even
Leafs
on the show itself.
Yeah, the Leafs fandom has the little brother syndrome in the social media sphere right now. What's up with that?
Hey, you know what? There's not much to defend on my side. Bad people and good actors on both sides. I'm just gonna start getting a little Trumpian on it. No, I think it's almost like I almost wish that the Leafs have just lost out ever since the Logan Stanley moment. Because now it's like now that the Leafs, I think it's 8-0 ever since that moment. It's like the biggest talking point anytime it's any sort of Jets Leafs game is you're gonna see the clip of Mark Scheifele. Hey boys, anything better than beating the Leafs? And the double hands up in the room. But yeah, no, we've completely swapped roles. I don't know who the big market is anymore. It's disappointing to see. Toronto Sports Network, no more.
Yeah, no more. I mean, it's a Saturday night. It's supposed to be their night on Hockey Night in Canada, and everyone's racing to the Winnipeg Jets Twitter replies to talk about being the only win, 2-3 weeks ago? Fuck, you guys are barely winning a game a week right now. Let's not worry about what's happening.
You know what?
Winnipeg,
at least,
brother.
you know what? I can see this. I'm going to spin this as positive that the Winnipeg Jets finally have their mentions open again. Because we had a moment of time where you had to fight it out on the dark web. So it's nice that we could be out in the light of Twitter.com.
Yeah, no comment on that one. But all jokes aside, let's get into some of the seriousness about this run, because
generational again, straight up.
It's getting very, very hard not to acknowledge this team as what it's been, and that's what the best or one of the very best teams in this league so far this year.
Oh,
The one loss coming literally weeks ago at this point. They've started the hard part of the schedule, the part that we've been waiting for. The interesting part about the Jets, and we're kind of joking around with the Jets Leafs dynamic right now. The Jets and Leafs are kind of in the same spot as far as what people expect at this point. Everyone knows they're a good regular season team. It's what happens come playoff time is really gonna be what ends up being the story for both franchises this year. But the Winnipeg Jets continue to answer more questions as this has gone on that people do have. Obviously, this week we finally get to the Colorado-Dallas portion of the trip through the Central. Beat Colorado 1-0 earlier this week on the back of a highly motivated Connor Hellebuyck after last year's playoff series.
big time.
That was a game that was one of the games I left so far this year still having those questions about this team come playoff time. They really did struggle with the speed. They let Colorado dictate the speed and tempo of the game. They kind of stopped pressuring once they had a lead. All those things come back to my mind of what happened in the playoffs, and you get a little concern built up. What I love about how this week ended was Dallas yesterday coming off that Colorado game. The team itself treated that Colorado game like a loss, just the way they're talking. Arniel acknowledged it himself out publicly. And you saw the contrast in those two games. Like, everyone knows, I mean, in 15 games, you're going to have some stinkers. You're not going to be at your best. And you still beat a good Colorado team while not at your best. You treated it like it was a loss, and then you saw the contrast, and this is where it's big. The very
I like
next
that.
game,
I like that a lot.
The very next game, you play the Dallas Stars, who I've touted as the best team in the Central. I'm not going to run away from that.
Me too.
Was talking about this being the measuring stick game, and they rolled through Dallas. But it wasn't just that they rolled through them, which was a ton of fun to be at that barn yesterday, man. The crowd was feeling it right from the opening puck drop. Then you see a performance like that. It just felt like things were back. You got the U.S. backup chant. Shout out to the boys that are looking to bring that kind of element back to the rink. We'll keep amping you guys up. But it was the contrast. The Winnipeg Jets go up 2-0 in that first period. And they don't sit back. They keep pressing. They keep dictating the pressure of the game, the speed in the game, and they really dominated almost every facet of that game. The power play contributes another 2 goals. The one aspect I find really makes a difference in how a Winnipeg Jets game looks is who wins the neutral zone. The neutral zone in transition tends to impact the Jets maybe more than a lot of teams just because they do have the puck movement struggles at times if they're getting forechecked hard. This was a game where they did control the neutral zone. They would turn it over and create the other way. They'd go get sustained O-zone time the other way. Dallas was the one on their heels, not the Winnipeg Jets. So to see a team do that to a quality opponent's one thing. To see them do it right after Colorado kind of opened up some old wounds just the night before. Yeah. And to see them actually as a team and organization take the lessons from that Colorado game and apply them right away to a Dallas opponent. And to see them as an org actually treat the Colorado game as a bad thing. That is one thing like this team has run away from in years past, where if like people like myself were awfully vocal, obviously, about the process in a game and what a game looks like and why that matters over time. In years past, that Colorado game would have been sold as the biggest win of the year. Not this year. This team took it as a step back. They knew Connor Hellebuyck won them that game, and they came into Dallas and they changed that narrative immediately. And it's things like that are, the hockey's been great, the record's been great, but it's all those little intricate details that you start thinking about with a team over a course of a year that just continues to build this hope of this Winnipeg Jets team finally learning from years past, finally taking a step within themselves and realizing there's things they can kind of control for themselves, and finally taking some accountability on what each individual day looks like.
Yep.
Man, this week's got me feeling awfully good. I'm getting off the fence post a little bit here.
Dude, I can tell you can't even get that shit-eating grin off your face. It's incredible. I like what you kind of touched about on the neutral zone, because I feel like that's kind of, well, it's the neutral zone. It's kind of like what I think as hockey fans or people who break the game down, we tend to forget about a lot of the time, because a lot of the biggest metrics that we follow are kind of based in what's going on in the D zone or what's going on in the offensive zone, right? And I even myself, I forgot about that, but I think you're kind of bang on. And when you think about a team like Colorado, I think even subconsciously, you're just so used to seeing guys like Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon just be so assertive when they get the puck and making that entry into the offensive zone through the neutral zone with speed. And I think what we saw a lot in that game, and I think over the course of what would happen in those playoff series, or what has happened in those playoff series against teams like Colorado, is that Winnipeg always seems to get really backed into the D zone with speed. And what I thought I saw, maybe I'm a bit wrong, or they didn't even give a chance for Dallas to do that, is they held that their blue line a lot better, which I think starts to really, nip some of those issues that you can have systematically in the butt right there by changing something. And I think you're dead on, where I really love the mindset of, not having the Colorado win be something, to hang your hat on and be like, let's fucking go. Like, that's actually a moment to be like, okay, we saw some issues. Sure, we got the win, but let's really hammer those home against the next huge divisional rival coming in. Because I thought even more so the Dallas game, bigger measuring stick one than the Colorado one right now, because of who's out of the lineup for Colorado. A lot of their forwards, the forward group is basically the AHL team. You finally maybe starting to get some reinforcements back, because I think Casey Middlestad's hurt. Valerian Chuskin's still working his way back on the roster. And I mean, we just heard now, it sucks to hear, but Gabe Landeskog had another significant setback in his progression. That's probably it for him at this point. Like, the surgical procedure that he had for his knee, like, there's not too many guys that have come back from that ever in any sport across the major sport. But no, it's starting to be a little bit undeniable. Like, we're still waiting. And I think we're going to touch on this a little bit later on, but we're still waiting for the first kind of hiccup to happen in the Winnipeg Jets season, where that be an injury bug that happens, or any sort of pebble in the shoe that can really derail this team, and see how they react. So, but right now, I mean, keep riding, keep celebrating.
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of like that the old mantra. Everything's good until you get punched in the face.
Punch in the
right?
face.
And
Mike Tyson.
You see how you respond. So I do think that is a big aspect when we are talking about professional sports, and that environment is, what does a team look like when they face adversity? And it's interesting, because I think that is something the Jets core has worked on in years past, where during the Paul Maurice days, I don't think they really did handle adversity all that well. To the point, Paul Maurice had to really protect them publicly during times like that, and you almost felt like you were being lied to about what you were watching every single night. And then we saw Rick Bowness kind of come in and change that narrative a little bit and kind of demand more out of them. And we saw that, yes, there was some down streaks last year, but it didn't end up becoming the prolonged half a season it would under Paul Maurice kind of thing. And then you're kind of seeing a little bit of that this year, where I do think they're answering adversity in a small sense, where they have spent a majority of the games this year down early, which is probably a concern. We know historically the team that scores first has, a 67% chance of winning the game. And so the Jets have shown adversity by really competing when they've gone and down, really battling back. Looking at some of their data on Hockey Viz, this team is a load when they're up one and down one. They really push in those tight games. It's when the games kind of get out of hand, you'll see that step back. Score effects. I mean, guys know when the game's out of hand. It's kind of natural. As much as
you're playing to kill the clock more so than playing to cut a throat.
100%. But this team really has made those big pushes when they're in tight hockey games. They've shown that adversity, but I do agree. What does it look like now when they do hit their first 2 or 3 game slide? To Scott Arniel's credit, and I've been talking him up a lot on the post game shows of late. He
deserves a ton of credit. A ton of credit.
I think this whole staff, man. One thing we saw it with the Murat article, how the whole staff's trying to work cohesively to bring specialty teams together, to bring data down to the players. Talked about it on the post-game show after the Colorado game. Love to see. What was interesting about that Colorado game is I thought the Jets really controlled the first period of it, and then Colorado turned it on, and it went the wrong way. After a period and a half of Colorado tilting the ice, Scott Arniel went to his blender for a team that was 13-1-0 at that, or 12-1-0 at that point. He's still going to find those solutions in every single game. This isn't a coach that's just going to, and he's showing this multiple times now, and something I like. We haven't seen a coach like this in Winnipeg yet, who's willing to shake things up a little bit, even when things are going so well. Normally, you'd have to see that 2, 3, 4 game slide before we see some new kind of change. Scott Arniel's like actively coaching every single game, trying to win every single game, trying to unlock something every single night. His staff has developed this power play, which we're looking at 16 power play goals in 15 games in the league. Over a goal a game is coming on the power play. The biggest difference from last year, which I believe all goes to coaching. Of those 16 goals, 8 have come from the first unit, 8 have come from the second unit.
I didn't even know that. I thought it was so PP1 heavy. That's crazy to me.
Right. So of those 16 goals, it took them 29 games to score 16 power play goals last year. They've done that in 15 games. Again, half the time. That's become such a big advantage for them. That belongs on coaching. So you're seeing the in-game feel stuff where you're seeing lines mixed up. You're seeing players used more efficiently to their role. Like the Adam Lowrys saw big Nathan McKinnon minutes, and Nathan McKinnon controlled those minutes, but guess what? The Lowry line didn't break, which allowed them to only need a goal from the other groups in that game. You're seeing how often he's using 2 centermen for defensive zone face-offs. There's a lot of little details that Scott Arniel seems to be all over, and his staff. Nick Ehlers, how about this? Obviously, Nick Ehlers is one of 4 Jets right now over a point a game. The other 3 being Morrissey, Connor, and Scheifele. Nick Ehlers, what have we talked about? What has my big thing been for years is we just want Nick Ehlers to be played as one of the best players on the Winnipeg Jets. Scott Arniel's finally playing him as the 4th highest Winnipeg Jets forward. Lowry comes in behind him at 5. So I think he's got the right 5 players playing the most minutes for the Winnipeg Jets up front. You like to see that because guess what? Your best players are they going to impact your success. Ehlers has the 2nd highest percentage of shift starts in the O-zone in the NHL at 29.1%. So your most dangerous offensive creator, for my money, is seeing heavy leverage in those starts. Only Matt Zuccarello is playing more minutes in the O-zone, and you're seeing the Nick Ehlers points and production juiced up here. It just everything Scott Arniel and the coaching staff is touching seems to be turning into gold early on this year. Again, it's going to be one of those things. What happens when you get punched in the face? But through 15 games, you got to be stoked with what you've gotten from this staff, from the specialty teams, from your high-end players, from your goaltending. Let's dive into Connor Hellebuyck. I mean, .935 when the average save percentage is .899 in the league.
Silly.
By Hockey Viz's data here, he's currently stopped 9.2 goals saved above expected through his early season returns. That's top 3. I saw Money Puck has him tied for second with Shesty at 7.2. I mean, we were a minute 22 away. Connor Hellebuyck continues to add to his resume, has the Winnipeg Jets franchise record after this week for a shutout streak at 191 minutes. He was a $1.22 and a stupid penalty away from 3 straight potential shutouts this week, man.
It's so ridiculous, man. Like this guy, like we said it a little bit pre-show too, that the no matter what happens in the regular season for this team, the deep success of the Winnipeg Jets is gonna ride fully on Connor Hellebuyck, and the Jets have done a good job of this so far of not overworking him and mixing in Eric Comrie games. But if they can get Connor Hellebuyck to a healthier workload throughout the regular season and maintain the level of play in terms of point percentage the rest of the way through, which, I mean, what they've set themselves up for right now is absolutely, it's shocking if they didn't. Connor Hellebuyck could be the X factor in the playoffs that I think the Jets obviously are going to need to have. So it's what this guy's doing right now is ludicrous, and what he's probably going to continue to do.
I'll throw something your way, and it is a little early for this, but let's say, and we've seen him do this over 4 full courses of seasons, so that's why I'm kind of okay going to this convo so early. If the Jets keep going on this run this year, and let's say they finish, last year they were top 4, let's say they finish in the top 4 again, top 3 maybe, based on this start. Could we see Connor Hellebuyck in the Hart conversation as a goaltender? I saw one comparison of his numbers to Carey Price's when Carey Price did it. Yeah, and it's early. It is early. Let's stress that it is early. But if there was a goalie to get himself into that combo, it'd be the guy going for his back-to-back Vezinas, would it not?
Yeah, that one's so tough because like there's always going to be the argument from the media of like, oh well, the goalies have their own trophy award built for, or their own award for it, right? And really too, because the Jennings, he can basically carry whoever he's tandem with to a Jennings at some point too. Really, yeah. It's just. I'd be more inclined to say that he'd be likely to get a Lindsay more than a Hart,
Yeah.
Because it's also kind of a golden era for the NHL right now too, that we have such an abundance of really great, talented players doing silly things that like I'd say he's probably got a stronger case for it this year because we haven't seen a monster start so far out of players like Leon Draisaitl or Connor McDavid. We have out of guys like Cale Makar and Nikita Kucherov. But like I'd say you're kind of hitting a point where like if there was going to be a season for Connor Hellebuyck to be a Hart nomination or win, it would be this year.
I like it. Let's dive into some of the breakdown of the Jets so far and what they've looked at, both from a numbers aspect, line aspect, some of the basic stats around them as well. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the power play, first in the NHL at 41.9% so far. Don't expect the percentage to remain that high, but if you're looking at a low 30s to mid 30s, and I think just watching this group, you could be seeing a team, a group that's going to go 1 for 3 on a consistent basis. I think you're happy with that. I think you're really happy with that. So far early in this year, and it's been what we've called a developing a work in progress. The PK is ranked 10th at 85.5% early on in this season. Compared to league average, they've allowed about 1% worse in quality against, which I mean is right there with league average. So not a terrible thing, especially when you have, I mean, the guy we've been talking about, Connor Hellebuyck, in net. So the PK seems to be in a pretty good spot right now. If you're looking at the underlying data, the offense the power play offense is creating at about 5% better of expected goals per 60. And just watching it, you could kind of see why. So you got to be happy with those things. Looking at some of the basic stuff, the Jets are currently 6th in shots per game. Like to see that. They're first in goals for per game, first in goals against per game. Pretty dangerous combo early on in the season. But looking at some of their underlying stuff, this has been a team. Early on, we were talking about how goaltending and the power play were really carrying them, and that we were going to need to see some work at 5-on-5. And I think to the Jets' credit, we've seen some strides there. So let's dive into some of it. Right now, after 15 games, the Jets at 5-on-5 are currently outscoring their opponent 35-24, which, hey, that's a pretty big gap. You like to see that.
Yep.
Looking underneath it, their Corsi, which is their shot attempts comparison, they're currently riding a 48.8% Corsi for percentage, which means the other team gets 52% or 51.2% of the shot attempts in any given game. Pretty much a coin flip, and when the Jets' talent is riding the heater it is, and they have the goaltender they do, that's the kind of gap I think this team can withstand, if you know what I mean. We're really only talking about a 1.1% away from being at that median. Expected goals, they're also sitting at 48.7%. Again, these are things that have been rising, especially you'll if you've been listening to the podcast, if you've been paying attention to kind of the line conversations, you'll see the jump the first and the second skill lines have taken. So these are areas that I think the Jets have been progressing with. I think that's a positive that their 5-on-5 game continues to approach that league average or better status. The one thing to kind of to watch for, they do have a 107% PDO right now, which just tracks team shot percentage and save percentage. And typically speaking, that'll regress to about 100. So that's some of the underlying profile you've seen. What do you think of what I just highlighted there, Ricky?
I mean, I don't really know how else to kind of like this team. We can't even really call them a paper tiger at this point because they're kind of like muscling through it. You know what I mean? Like,
and they're trending in the right direction with a lot of those numbers
yeah,
too.
like even like I'll even describe this kind of with I finally had a good week with the Leafs actually scoring power play goals and that lifting them up above the kind of the tide that they were rummaging around and just having good 5-on-5 numbers, but still kind of losing close games. It's I know it's still quite a small sample size. Like in a week, the Leafs go from dead last on the power play to top half of the power play, just having a week of success. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to really judge where I think the Winnipeg Jets are going to we're going to really see the entirety of the scope of what's going on there until we have some sort of slide back. But like you're saying, there's not really much of a regression happening. They're actually kind of working through things better. So I would argue that there are some guys like what we're seeing is overall, numbers of what's going on the ice. I do still think there are some individual players that are playing above what really their ceilings are at the moment. So we'll see what happens in that sense. But it's hard to really fight against anything that's going on within that room right now. They're striking oil and gold at the same time.
pretty valuable resources to get all in one, eh? And let's take a look at what kind of some of those lines have been doing, because obviously there's been the long-standing debates between how some of the lines are used, and we've seen some progress there, and I think that's all that matters at the end of the day. We want this team to be successful. If they're going to run it a certain way, we want to see progress with the way they're running it. We've also seen Scott Arniel not as frigid with the group. So if there has been a down spout, he's gone to make a change quickly. And I think that's what's interesting about that entire discussion. And we talked about this on the postgame show a couple nights ago. I think Scott Arniel's handling the trust of the room early on very well as well. Like, obviously, the on-ice results have been good. But the one thing we know is that the Winnipeg Jets, especially Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele, want and like to play together. And we were seeing early on this year where it still looked so bad like last year, but they were still getting wins. So what I think Scott Arniel's done really well here is he's built the trust of, okay, we're getting good results, but I'll send the message in certain times when needed that, hey, your play's slipping. I'm going to go to this card when we need to. And then the next game, giving them a chance to redeem themselves. So you're kind of seeing that push and pull between a coach and the stars that he's dealing with. And I think it's working both as what we're seeing on ice, but also likely the trust of that group inside that room, which Scott Arniel lost a team within a year and a half in his first go-around. It's safe to say he's really learned from that lesson. And I think he's really handling that conversation and the tools he has at his disposal to kind of not let it slip really, really well.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And like we even talked about a little bit of this earlier too, is that like you get hired for a job, large part of that your first time around is learning how to do it right. And I think there were some issues in the way that Arniel handled his initial time in Columbus that he seems to have rectified on this go around, at least so far that we've seen. And that's, an impressive thing in its own sight to be able to have that sort of hindsight and care enough to be like, I want to succeed at this kind of position, this kind of role, and, finding and learning and adjusting the way that you go about it on your second go around, that he's having a great amount of success right now. For sure. This guy, we're actually a good question be like, I remember we did an initial, I think one of the first shows we looked at on the Leafs episode, we talked about Jack Adams odds. Yeah. I would not have Scott Arniel as second or third in my favorites or in my odds right now. He's got to be number one.
I think you're right. And I remember before the year, someone had asked me what my thoughts on that. And I thought it would be a really hard narrative game for him to win because Rick Bowness was obviously in that conversation. They were fourth in the league. And I think it was safe to expect at least a slight step back. It's very hard for him not to have the narrative on his side with historic starts, 14-1-0, this specialty teams unit that is all world from a group that didn't have shit last year. I mean, yeah, I'm with you. Add Scott Arniel to the early season awards talk. Absolutely. Let's dive into the line zone, kind of get a breakdown of where everybody is after the 15-game mark. And let's start with the top line. Obviously, a line I've rallied against for some time now, but we've seen some strides there over the last few weeks, and I think that's important. And if you're going to get positive results, I don't care who it's from. Let's just see it. And if you remember where they were the last update, this is going to sound quite a bit better, in my opinion anyways. Through 15 games, 199 minutes, the top line of Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, Gabe Vilardi now sits at a 10-9 goal disadvantage. Much better than I believe it was 10-2 at one point. I think they're on a bit of a streak here. Their shot attempts, which was a low 40s the last time we were looking at this, they are now at a slight disadvantage of 212 to 206. So we're getting a 49.28% split in shot attempts when the top line's on the ice. And I'm okay with when you look at Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, and Gabe Vilardi being a slight negative in those spots because I do think they have the shooting talent and the ability around the net to outproduce those margins. So I think if you're talking 49% and higher with that group, you're probably a little more comfortable than, say, if the Lowry line was dipping below 50% metrics. If you get what my drift here, makes sense to you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're now actually running a positive on the expected goals side, which is huge, which means they're generating a lot more quality than they're giving up. And the one thing I harped on last time, and this is going to explain the difference in them having a positive expected goals, is last time around when we talked about this, their high danger shot attempts, they were, what was it? It was like a 13 point gap that they were giving up, much higher quality from the slot than they were giving up. At the 15 game mark, they are now 38-38 in what they're creating in the high danger areas of the ice. And I think that's a big positive compared to where they were at as a group a couple weeks ago when we had this conversation.
Yep. No, I think you're bang on. And like, I know we harped on it the last few weeks, really, that, I mean, we had the Moneyball analogies. Do they get on base? They like to play with each other. And at a certain point, they would have to really start to prove that. And it's nice to see, I guess, from a Jets fan standpoint, that they are. I mean, like, if I'm looking at some of these numbers a little bit down ballot, like there's definitely a couple lines coming up that we're going to talk about that probably are prime targets for some mean or return to regression or means. But if you're starting to see the top line start to win some of those 5-on-5 minutes in correspondence and, with the numbers that they're putting up on the power play, you're going to still be outscoring some of those issues that are going to start coming back to the means anyways. So like there's really only green lights that I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, no, that was the thing too. And we did keep talking about it, that at least with banking the points, you'd be able to keep making this bet and you'd hope to see strides from it. The Winnipeg Jets have seen some strides the last few weeks. You hope it continues, but they've seen some strides. So that's where it's kind of at. I see the downsides in a game like Colorado, and I believe it was the Tampa game, still exist, and we'll see where that continues to go. But on the aggregate over the last few weeks, you got to like what you saw from that group.
1,000%.
The Lowry, Nino, Mason Appleton group continues to be the apple of the eye in Winnipeg, outscoring their opposition through 15 games, 10-1. Outshooting their opposition via shot attempts 172-145, and out expecting to score their opposition 7.44 to 6.15. All that to say, I doubt the 10-1 split holds, but the Adam Lowry, Nino Ryder, Mason Appleton line continues to be an absolute force for the Winnipeg Jets when it comes to driving play in the right direction. When it comes to simplifying the game, when it comes to building momentum, that's the line Scott Arniel goes to go create a shift in the O-zone, to go lean on guys, to get some physicality in the game. That continues to be the line, the identity group of the Winnipeg Jets. And everything you're looking at underlying-wise might not be something you expect to last at 10-1, but it is something you expect to last as a group that continues to win their minutes awfully handily, especially when we know they are so strong defensively and have Connor Hellebuyck back there. I don't think it's a group. It's kind of the opposite of what we see and what we're talking about with, I think the first line can outscore. Slight dip into the negative. I think this line can out-defend a slight dip into the negative that way, even though you're not seeing that. So, again, this is a group that continues to do all the right things for the Winnipeg Jets, continues to drive play the right direction, continues to be a momentum driver for them. You see them out there in important situations trying to turn this game over. Hats off to the Adam Lowry, Mason Appleton, Nino Niederreiter line through 15 games.
Yeah. And even like looking down at like the Perfetti, Nemestikov, Ehlers line, those guys are slightly losing their matchups and shooting at 149, 151, which gives us a 49.67 Corsi 4 percentage. They are outscoring their opposition 9-3. That's 75% right now, with a 43.31 expected goals for percentage right now. So we're losing those 5-on-5 numbers. And I think this is kind of like what I speaks a bit towards what I was saying about we don't really know what's going to happen to this team until they hit that slump because the sample sizes. I know it feels like we've been talking about this for months now, which we have been, but the sample size is relatively small still. There's still 60 odd games left in this NHL season, regular season at least. So like the 10-1 goals for the Lowry line and even the 9-3 goals for that Perfetti Ehlers line, that could get brought back to the average in a week. And like I was just saying, I've seen that with what happened with Toronto this week with the power play percentage, right? So it's gonna we're really only gonna truly understand what happens to this team when they get hit in the face, when they hit that speed bump. It's gonna be, and if they hit it, they go on a 2-3 game skid and come back out on top. Then we have something a lot more substantive to talk about. But right now, it feels almost speculative. Like it's like the stocks are only going up. The S&P 500 is hitting all-time highs. Everything's looking good, but we haven't had the dip yet.
Hey, as long as the dip doesn't come from my boy QUBT, eh?
800 or my boys at SGMO. That's an inside joke for Nick and I.
Yeah. Yeah, we might be hitting the market hard lately. But yeah, you touch on the Nemestikov Ehlers Perfetti line, and it's been an interesting group because it is a group I think has taken some strides, but it's also a group that I think their weaknesses are pretty glaring at times. Clearly, they're not going to outscore a 43.31 expected goals percentage 9-3 over the course of a full season. Though I do think they can slightly outscore the 49% shot attempts because of like a Nik Ehlers. And we were talking about how Nik Ehlers has been used as a leveraged offensive player so far this year. This is an area where I think you're starting to see Cole Perfetti, who I'm really, really liking where Cole Perfetti's game's going. His ability to be that sneaky like pick-off guy where he's creating turnovers with just like a little stick lift and it's going the other way. And he looks a lot more confident. Remember, I believe me and you went to that game early in the season and you were talking about how it felt like Cole Perfetti, as soon as he'd get to that red line, he'd just dump it in. And like
I think it was that first Minnesota game.
Yes, and it felt like so forced, and we're like, man, this kid, where's the confidence? Where's the puck handling? It feels
just
like
outside. He just didn't have the tempo, right?
Yes,
he was out of sync,
and it feels like now watching him, he's making those turnovers, and then he's skating with it, and he's looking confident. He's looking to make the strong offensive play. Him and Ehlers seem to be working off of each other's and understanding each other's speed into space a little bit more. Really like where Perfetti's game's at. He's had a bit of tough puck luck the last week here where he's hit 4 posts at this point in his last 3 games. Though I think it's become pretty clear that they will need an offensive centerman for that group. Vlad Nemestikov, a great energy guy that's going to get to the corners, guy that's going to work his ass off, guy that's going to get beat up to make the play. Just the puck offensively dies on his stick too often for that group.
I was just about to make that point too. Because imagine if you like the Jets don't need like a bona fide 2C on the marketplace because you definitely had that someone like Adam Lowry. Imagine you had a guy who's like a bona fide like 2B. And you get to bump Nemestikov down to like that 4th line. I just think you start seeing Perfetti and Ehlers with their skill set and the way that they read the game. You could it wouldn't shock me if they start winning like that Corsi and expected goals for by like 55%, which is be a fantastic revelation as well.
Yeah, so we'll see what that kind of looks like because I do think that's the obvious upgrade as the season goes on for this group. And then speaking of bumping Nemestikov down to the fourth line, which would be the inevitable aspect of a trade, this fourth line of Kupari, Iafallo, and Morgan Barron, underlying metrics, cannot complain at all for a fourth line and what they're doing. Currently tied on the score sheet 2-2 in their 5-on-5 minutes as a group. Outshooting their opposition 87-68 for a 56% margin, and out expecting to score their opposition 3.85 to 2.7 for a 58.8% margin. For a fourth line playing limited minutes, can't complain about what you're getting from the Winnipeg Jets. This is one of the most simple keep it simple, stupid lines I've seen in the sport. It's a group that, hey, they go out there. Don't expect any fancy east-west stuff. Don't expect any big play heroics. Expect some chips off the wall. Expect some stops and starts. Expect some hard forechecks, and expect three guys that are going to get to the net, and hopefully they can jam one in. This is a group that continues to push the game in the right way. Probably not a group I'm expecting to score all that often based on what we're watching, but just the elements each guy provides. Morgan Barron, probably the definition of simple, safe game. I mean, I watched him have a lane to the net that he then threw a chip into the corner from. Might be over safe, but I mean, he's that guy that you could just trust that he's going to go be the forechecker in the corner. He's going to make the safe chip out of the D zone. He's going to get to the net. Like, there's just nothing sexy about it, but you know he is going to do what you want from him. Rasmus Kupari gets his second of the year. Mr. Cardio looks like he's got some confidence early on this year. The speed elements really created some space for that line. We're seeing him draw some penalties because of that space early on. And he does look like a guy that's a lot more confident with the puck on his stick around the net early on this year. He seems to have really won over Scott Arniel ahead of David Gustafsson early on this year. I do think if Nemestikov was dropped down, he might be the guy coming out. But Kupari's really taken some steps from last year. And then Alex Iafallo, just a projectable, really solid pro's pro. He's a defensive winger. He got some good hand-eye. He works his ass off. You know what to expect from him. A little expensive at $4 million, but a quality defensive player that a coach knows when you throw him out there. You could trust him that he's not going to do anything stupid. He's not going to cost you defensively. He's going to give you a shift. So that group's been solid for him.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. And like you broke it down already. I mean, it's a good old fashioned lunch pail hockey mindset and X's and O's on that fourth line. It's so fun to see. It's very reminiscent of the bring Jim Slater to work days kind of stuff. There's gonna be IX Iafallo for sure.
That's the group to do it for sure. That is the group to do it. Looking at the defensive groups is a little interesting compared to the forward groups that are all trending the right way. This is where you're gonna really want to see some improvement from the Winnipeg Jets this year. And it's not the group that I thought it would be. Let's talk about the best group early on, and that's been the Samberg-Pionk group. Talk about chaos. There's goals everywhere when they're on the ice, and that is leading to a 16-13 goals advantage for the Winnipeg Jets second pair. 29 goals when they're on the ice at 5-on-5 together so far this year. They're outshooting the opposition in their minutes 243 to 211 for a 53.5% margin. They're out expecting to score their opposition 10.95 to 10.39 for a 51.31% margin. And it's an interesting group because I think for the most part this year they've been really sound. You're seeing them play off of each other really well. Dylan Samberg seems to read off of how Neil Pionk plays. So one thing I really noticed at the rink this week is how often Sandberg would like look over to check on Pionk before making his read, and you're seeing how strong he is defensively really play into how well Neil Pionk is at bouncing the other way. The one downside with this group is, and it comes in when you see, I mean, they've been on for 29 goals already. Their tough nights are really tough in the D zone, and the floor comes right out, and we're talking about multiple goals. It's the type of line that, or the type of D pairing where if you don't have their best night, they legitimately can cost you a game. And I mean,
just the one big stinker that sticks out the front of mind is that Toronto game. Even like, imagine what those numbers look like, because I think they were both on for at least what was it, 4 or 5 goals? I think.
Yeah.
Like like those numbers that we're talking about, they look like Cinderella type numbers if you take out one stinker, really.
For sure. So it's a group that, for the most part this year, you've liked what you've seen. I like what I've seen from Sandberg as a bit of a vacuum cleaner of a defenseman as far as cleaning up the game defensively, cleaning up his own mistakes. Struggles a little bit with the puck on his stick. I've also appreciated his offensive instincts and when he's jumping into the play offensively for a defensive defenseman. I think early on this year, he's really answered the questions about whether he could jump into the top 4. Obviously, he was such a good defensive third pairing guy, but you never know with D-men until you see them in those minutes more religiously. And I think Neil Pionk, obviously a player that I've always had questions about and continue to.
And that's rightfully so with how he, the style of his game and how he does it.
For sure, and I think we've seen the highs and the lows this year already.
Yeah.
Where when he's overthinking himself, when he's chaotic, when he's pressured too much, that the turnovers build up, the mistakes build up, and the game falls apart. We've also seen a very good version for more games than not this year, where in transition he's actually jumping into plays and picking the play off and taking odd man rushes the other way, or he's the fourth player jumping up on the rush and being the guy driving the net, or I mean, he's 1 point off of being a point a game defenseman early on this year. So he's a very interesting player where his good has been very good, but his downside is the type of downside that can kill you in a hockey game. Overall, you like what you've seen from the group, but it does remain the spot I would like to see an upgrade come deadline time. The 44-2 pair is a pair we probably expect better from. This was a group that was a top 5 pair in the NHL last year. So far this year, they're outscoring their opposition 8-7, though they are getting hammered 266-210 in the shot attempts department, and they're losing the expected goals battle 11.05 to 8.33 for a margin of 43%. What's feeding into that is they are losing the high danger shot attempt area 42-31. And what I think's playing into a lot of that line's step back this year is it's looked like early on that Dylan DeMello is a step slower in his decision making and in his reads, and it's created a lot of havoc at times for the pair. I still see Josh Morrissey as that elite presence. He was the guy again against Colorado. He's had some big games where he's the guy clearly controlling the game from the back end. I've just been worried about Dylan DeMello's game early on this year. A guy with a lengthy history. I mean, he just had twins. It could be a whole situation where he's getting used to dealing with everything at home, but he's been the one guy.
Imagine.
He's been the one. He joked about it. He said he was going from man to man to having to work his zone with parenting at home. But he's definitely been the one aspect on that pair for a guy that I think's been such a good shutdown D-man for them for some time, has looked a step slower so far, and I'm hoping that can kind of get cleaned up, because the one thing the Winnipeg Jets need is Josh Morrissey in the best environment for his minutes. He's just so valuable for this team. And it's another aspect where I think Scott Arniel's really handled things well, where we've seen at times when they're either tied or chasing a game in the third period, we'll see Neil Pionk jump up with Morrissey for those minutes and see Sandberg and DeMello see some time together. It's just been interesting to see some of those tweaks. Now, the battle of the third pair has been kind of interesting. Stanley with Miller, we've seen them win the goals advantage 7-1, but we've seen them get hammered in the underlying aspects of the game. That pair gets outshot attempted 146 to 116, and they get out expected to score 6.48 to 5.01 for a margin of 43%. And I think it's very obvious when you watch the pairing that Colin Miller is really carrying the big load. And what I'm seeing is Logan Stanley is not a regular defenseman in this league. He's a number 7 or number 8, and I think 7 might be generous. He's an 8-9 type of guy in a system. He doesn't bring anything to the NHL game that's overly attractive that you could bet on and say, you know what, there's going to be a guy here still. When he's under pressure, he's the one shoveling pucks into everybody else's skates and whatnot. We've seen some stupid penalties lead to killing penalties this year. I don't understand how a guy that big could be so poor at picking up the guy net front, which are all the aspects that everyone's hoping are going to be there because he's so big, is the aspects he struggles. Again, I think the best place in the ice for him is in the O-zone blue line where he gets shots through. And I don't understand why we keep going to the project when Hayden Fleury looked real solid, and the underlying profile of him and Colin Miller as a contrast was 0-0 in goals, but the pair outshot attempted their opposition 51 to 37 for a margin of just under 58%, and expected to score 1.67 and 1.16 for a margin of 59%. And I think why you saw some of those margins move the other way with that pair was Hayden Fleury was sneaky good at pinching and keeping the play alive in the O-zone and trying to create more offense for himself, where I think Logan Stanley in open ice really gets in trouble for himself. So just an interesting aspect there on the third pair. Obviously, you could point to the 7-1 goals advantage. I just look at the rest and what's going on there and think, hey, this is not sustainable. And I really hope Ville Heinola is the one that gets the run once he's healthy.
So I just searched up on Natural Stat Trick. You might get a laugh at this. The PDO for the Stanley and Miller pairing is at a 1.1 right now, which is
it's gonna crash.
Crazy high. Crazy high. Yeah. But
no, I go for it.
No, I was gonna say, like, I'm honestly quite shocked at what the numbers for underlying that are for the 44-2 pairing. Like, that was handily last year one of the best pairings in the NHL, and to see them struggling so far, and you know, the success of the Jets overall, like, it's a shocking kind of correlation. I think that's maybe, I'm staggered by that, honestly.
Well, and that's what's fun about this start is, like, that's a big aspect that could be improved and all of a sudden equate to even tougher results to play against. I mean, that's kind of the reverse way to look at this, right? It's a group that I'm not overly concerned about just because of the lengthy history. I've talked a couple times on the post-game show where just to give like a little bump, a little breather, I might consider doing a Miller-DeMello swap and just let DeMello find his feet again in a sheltered role. We've seen him do well with Logan Stanley in that spot in the past. Maybe it's with Ville Heinola, who I think he's an ideal partner for. And I just wonder if you do that not to get worried about DeMello, as a way of like DeMello finding himself. Maybe Miller could help out Morrissey in the time being and try and just give that breather. Those are some of like the little aspects I've thought about, but it is a group when you have a guy as good as Josh Morrissey and a guy that has been as solid defensively as long as he has. He's a guy that I think is a very high IQ player in Dylan DeMello. I'm not as worried about it big picture, and that's exciting because as soon as that pair starts rolling, it's going to continue to push the rest of this into a higher territory. So you look at the profile, there's obviously places to be improved. There's things to work on, and there has been. But we've seen this team actually take this start and push for more from areas already. I just look at this and say, hey, I'm expecting regression at some point. 14-1-0, they're not going to do that all year. But a lot of the underlying stuff, it can be a bit better. It could be a lot worse. Let's see where it goes.
Yep. 100%.
All right. Any other things you were thinking of here this week, or should we get out of here for the week?
Not a ton. Like I said, these weekly ones are great to just kind of get over the overarching themes going on with the Jets. Yeah, no, I don't got much going on. I will say though, keep enjoying this team while it's still, hitting the chord that's hitting.
Man, it's been fun times at the rink. Like, honestly, what a year to kind of get some seasons and be a part of this. Yeah. It's the crowd's been lively. Even when some of those games that were under 13,000, the people that were there were like feeling it and wanting to be a part of it. Yeah. Something's coming. The vibes are coming back in that group. If you could be a part of it, come hang out.
And I will say, if you're looking to just have a night out too, like get a ticket. Like I've been to the Jets games years since they've been here. The in-house, theatrics, things between the whistles, intermissions, the pregame show that we saw for the Halloween game beforehand. Yeah. It was awesome. It's becoming much more of a show rather than just what it used to be, where it was you're showing up to watch a hockey game. Mm-hmm. It's quite a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've had a blast so far this year. I've definitely enjoyed it. So I just want to say, as usual, thank you for tuning in. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, be a friend, tell a friend, and pass this along. If you're looking for, and we've started to see those numbers climb, if you're looking for a post-game experience where you want to be heard and come hang out, the vibes have been high over at the Landing Strip. We are now on Twitch and YouTube live post-games. Sack Squirtle makes appearances if there's a win. We dive into all the immediate thoughts. A lot of the comment section runs the show. There's a call-in feature if you want to call in and chat with the fellas. So make sure to check out the Landing Strip post-game about half an hour after home games, immediately after road games. And, be a friend, tell a friend. We'll see you guys next week.
This has been a Top Line Media production.